Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Canucks Conversation, brought to you by the great folks over at Zephyr Epic. You can use promo code Hockey Season, capital H, capital S, all one word, Hockey Season. That will get you $5 off your order at ZephyrEpic.com. That is ZEPHYR Epic. Check them out on all platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, whatever it is. They've got you covered for all of your trading card needs. Free shipping Canada-wide on any order over $50. They also have a retail location in Surrey, so be sure to go check out our friends at Zephyr Epic as you see the beautiful memorabilia sitting on our desk in the iconic Sheraton Wall Center. That is where we record from. My name is Dave Quadrelli. Co-host is Harmon Dial. Our technical producer, the man at the controls, is Grady Sass. Game day. Formal. Look at us. That's when we're at our best, is game days, and I got the turtleneck. Yeah, it's a mock turtleneck as well, right?
Mock, yeah. I think I wore too much, or I put on too much moisturizer this morning though, because I'm looking at the feed and my face looks so shiny with these bright lights.
Oh, jeez, it does. I did not notice that.
Note to self: put on this moisturizer.
You're just shining with positivity, Harm. That's the real reason.
Wow, thanks, Grady.
I like the "I'm just way too moist" Harmon Dial quote that we just got.
Wow, don't radio me like
that. Okay, busy day today. Obviously, Bo Horvat makes his return to Vancouver tonight. We touched on it a little bit yesterday. We're probably not going to dive too much into it today. Bit of a shorter episode today, but there is some stuff that we need to get to, because this morning we found out that defenseman Carson Soucy will be out 6 to 8 weeks. That hurts the Vancouver Canucks. It does. And there was an optional morning skate today. So we don't really have line rushes, but we do know, if you read the scenes for morning skate courtesy of Jeff Patterson over at CanucksArmy.com, if you read that, you'll know that the Canucks are going with 4 right-handed defensemen tonight. The patchwork defense, Akito Hirose out of the lineup. And that means you were right yesterday when we had that Wolanin Hirose thing, when I talked about that, maybe it's short term, unless they make a call up for Wolanin. You were right. They want Hirose in this lineup. When we get to that in our game preview,
but apparently not enough to address him.
Exactly. And obviously he'll dress tomorrow against Calgary, right? But the fact that there's 4 right-handed defensemen tonight, we'll get to that in the game preview. Let's just instant reaction to the Canucks losing Carson Soucy.
Yeah, it's tough because it felt like Soucy was really starting to find his stride over the last handful of games. Him and Myers together had been playing pretty steady, quiet, relatively mistake-free hockey. And it's the type of pair that you didn't feel like you really needed to shelter at all. You could sort of use them in any situation. Obviously, they weren't going up against top lines by any stretch of the imagination, but it was the sort of pair that, okay, if they even get trapped for a D-zone start or an icing or something, you felt pretty confident that you got a couple of veteran players that both seemed to, at that point, or the last handful of games, be moving the puck pretty responsibly, defending responsibly, always sort of in the right positions. And with Soucy, it's interesting. I don't think when I look at his start so far as a Canuck, I don't think he's necessarily made as many defensive stops and like changes of possession as I sort of initially anticipated, but his puck skills and his ability to transition has been far less of an issue as I anticipated, if that makes sense.
It does. Do you think it helps that his role has been kind of as that third pairing guy, that he's been able to do that?
No, I think it's the same role that he was playing in Seattle. So it's just an extension. It's just interesting that when I watched a lot of his tape in the playoffs for the Kraken, it seemed like he was struggling on defensive zone retrievals when you'd have a heavy forecheck on him, that he wasn't able to make quick decisions with the puck. You'd be able to pin him. And on the other side of the coin, he was able to break up a ton of plays defensively. So you sort of watched him and went, you love him defensively, but man, you worry about as soon as the puck gets on his stick, that he wasn't making a lot of plays. Whereas I think it's been more of a balance watching him play so far, where I've actually been quietly impressed at some of the simple 5 to 10 foot passes he makes. Haven't been worried about his puck moving or turnovers at all. And then defensively, he's been solid, but there haven't been many wow moments defensively, which is totally fine. I think he's done his job totally fine. And yeah, it is a blow to lose him. I think it's worth mentioning that, as J-Pat had brought up on yesterday's show, 7 of the Canucks' next 8 games are against teams below the playoff bar. And the only team that is above the playoff bar is Anaheim, which finished 32nd last year. So it's not exactly, even though they are on the right track this year, not exactly an intimidating opponent. So hopefully that helps, at least in the short term, the Canucks patchwork defense find the right combos.
Soucy blocked a shot in Montreal in the win on Sunday. So did Tyler Myers. They both got banged up on the same shift. Myers is in the lineup tonight despite having a maintenance day yesterday and not taking part in the optional skate today. Rick Tocchet confirmed that Tyler Myers would be in the lineup tonight, so they have some veteran presence in the lineup. And hey, who would have thought at the start of the year that we'd be saying, oh, thank God Tyler Myers is still in the lineup. But this organization's depth is about to be tested. And we'll use that to transition into our next kind of topic when it comes to this sort of thing. The Soucy conversation is, okay, Nikita Zadorov and Chris Tanev. That's the first thing I saw on Twitter was when that injury was announced. Okay, well, now they're definitely trading for one of these guys. I still don't see the fit, and I don't think if you're the Canucks, I don't think you rush to make that trade for either guy right now, because everybody on Twitter that I saw was saying, oh, clock's ticking, they got to get it done now. I don't know if you do. I think, first of all, you hope that your organizational depth is good enough to help you stay afloat from losing a bottom pair defenseman who, mind you, like you said, was playing very well. So I'm not trying to discredit what Soucy's doing, but let's be honest, it is a bottom pair defenseman that you are trying to replace. Sure, his minutes got higher in some games, but regardless, you are replacing a guy in the bottom half of your defense core. So you're hoping that the organizational depth is enough. I think if you're the Canucks, and I mean, we've talked about that Zadorov and Tanev are both free agents at the end of this year, so why would you pull the trigger and give up assets to get them? And we'll get to what that might cost, because Dollywall had some stuff on that. But I'm just looking at it and saying, don't make the trade yet. If you're going to make a trade, I don't think you need to rush. I think you want to see what this defensive core looks like. And look, if you start going on a skid, then yeah, okay, maybe make a trade. Because going into tonight, the Canucks are one win away from being top of the Western Conference. So sure, maybe you do owe it to the players if they're able to get there, and then all of a sudden you go on a skid because your team can't defend anymore. Maybe you do owe it to the players to go out and get them some help if you go on a skid. But if you're more or less playing the same level of hockey, I wouldn't be giving away one of these premium assets like a Nils Höglander or a Vasily Podkolzin, which, according to Dollywall, like I just mentioned, they're looking in Calgary. If they trade one of these guys, they're looking for a young prospect kind of player that can play in their lineup right now. And I think Podkolzin and Höglander are the guys that fit that bill.
We'll also think about it from Calgary's perspective. The only reason, if I'm Craig Conroy, that I'd want to make a trade this far in advance of the trade deadline is if the trade is a clear win for me. Because otherwise, I've got the time and leverage to wait until the deadline, wait until more teams have need for blue line help. And so if you're presumably only making that trade if it's a win from Calgary's perspective, it's probably not a price you'd love to pay if you're Vancouver. And especially, again, we're talking about rentals. And of course, whether it's Tanev or Zadorov, there could be a fit beyond this season, but you don't know that when you're making the deal. Unless Calgary gives the Canucks permission to speak to the agent, which why would Calgary do that?
Yep, exactly.
So, like you said, I think it's going to be an intriguing test over the next little while. Like, I'm curious to see with Akito Hirose, for example, he's 24 years old. Like, I need to double check this, but I think he's older than Quinn Hughes. So if we're talking about, they're the same age, but months wise, I mean.
Yes, exactly. Like us, which I always remind people.
Yeah. So the point is, you need to find out what this guy is now, right? This isn't a long-term project that you got another year for him to develop. It's sort of now or never for Hirose to become an NHL defenseman. And these are the situations where I know he's not dressing tonight, but you want to figure out what this guy exactly is, right? And it's also an important sort of test to know what your other defense depth options look like. Like, what does Mark Friedman look like if he's ramping up his minutes slightly? What does Noah Juleson look like in the sense that he's struggled this season, but he looked pretty effective last year? So what is he? Is he effective NHL depth or is he not? So I think these are important questions that you want to have answered so that you can make the most informed decision possible if and when you do decide to upgrade your blue line depth.
And with Zadorov and Tanev, Craig Conroy's, this is his first year on the job. He has to hit home runs with these trades, right? He's not looking to do any favors for anybody. He's going out there trying to get the best possible return. And whether that's with the Canucks, with the Leafs, another team out east. If it's going to be the Canucks, you bet he's going to extract the most value you can. And I just don't think the Canucks are in a position right now to be paying premium assets for UFA rentals here.
This is another thing. And Grady, I think that's a great point, especially the part where you said going to get the best deal possible. Because another thing Dhaliwal mentioned today was that they don't want to move him to a West Coast team. I'm sorry, but if you're in the basement of the division, like, why is that a priority? That, we can't trade this guy to the Canucks. Are you kidding me? That's so silly. Get the best return you can. If that doesn't come from the Canucks, sure, don't do business with the Canucks. But what are you talking about? Oh, we can't trade him to a Western. Why? Why can't you trade him to a Western Conference team? It's not like you're competing this year. Do this retool on the fly. Like, just imagine if that came out in Vancouver, right? Like if, I don't know. They've had so few trade chips over the years, but they were like, yeah, we're trading. We have some people that want to trade for Eric Goodbranson, but we're going to do Pittsburgh because they might not have the best offer, but we really want to keep Eric Goodbranson out of the West. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Like, it's crazy to me. Like, take the best offer. Who cares where the team's located if you're in the basement? It just blows my mind that this is a thought process for some people. And again, I'm not criticizing Rick, who reported it. It's not me saying, oh, Rick, I can't believe you would say that. It's, if this is actually what Calgary's thinking, what are they thinking?
Yeah, it would make sense if it was like Matthew Tkachuk, right? Because
Sure,
you don't want to move a superstar to a divisional rival, but we're talking about.
Can you think of the amount of shots Chris Tanev's going to block on us?
Like, we're talking about number 3, 4, 5 defensemen.
Yes,
who are rentals expiring this year, and your team isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah,
for Calgary. But hey, I mean, look, when you got a wagon like the Canucks, like
you got to go all in, right? Trade the first, trade Hoglander, trade Podkolzin.
Oh. No, I was meaning it more from like Calgary's perspective. You're just scared. You don't want to, you don't want to, feed that wagon.
And if they get Chris Tanev, they're a cup contender for years to come. Obviously,
exactly.
That's what the Flames are worried about.
Young Chris Tanev, durable, doesn't have many miles on him.
Okay. So let's get that to be the question in our anyone else. I want to hear people what they think about trading for a defenseman, because like I said, my take is wait it out. See what this team looks like with their current defense depth. You brought up some great points about how you want some questions answered about your organizational depth. And someone in the chat, I'll scroll up to find it during anyone else, but someone brought up a good point about how, okay, you've got Matt Irwin, you've got Christian Wallin, you've got options if Hirose doesn't work out. It's not like years past where, okay, if this guy doesn't work, we don't know what we're going to do. They have options. So we'll get to that more in our anyone else section, but let's quickly preview the game. Before we do that though, got to remember Wendy's Daily Face-Off Survivor Pool. Go check it out, folks. Wendy's is letting you win real food with Daily Face-Off Survivor. For those of you who smoke the competition, Wendy's is rewarding you with weekly prizes that will have you winning despite your lack of team building skills. Download the Wendy's app and score yourself 150 bonus reward points on your first order and grab a sweet victory from the mouth-watering jaws of defeat, along with some fresh, never frozen beef. Put your prediction skills to the test and score yourself 1,300 bonus points if you win the week. Use your points to grab your favorite menu items at Wendy's. Sign up to play Wendy's Daily Face-Off Survivor Fantasy to win weekly prizes like the spicy chicken sandwich from Wendy's and the Wendy's app over at Daily Face-Off. I'm not doing too well, so I don't want to talk about it more than that. But I'll be back next week. And I'll have it I'll have it going. I'll have the boys cooking. I'll have some good props ready to go. Okay, quickly, let's preview the game tonight. Not going to spend too much time on this, but Islanders, Canucks, what are you looking for tonight?
I mean, it's sort of an extension of the conversation we were already having in terms of the blue line, right? It's interesting. I mean, interesting is one word to put it, that they kept Juleson in the lineup and are sort of going with 4 righties and 2 lefties instead of Hirose. Juleson in the lineup worries me. I'm not going to lie. Friedman, obviously, him drawing back into the lineup, that was a no-brainer considering how calm and steady he's been. But Juleson, I'm not entirely sold on yet based off his form this season, right?
Yep.
You think back to that Montreal game in the first period, for example, he has a poorly timed pinch that puts him out of position for a 2-on-1 rush against. In the second period, there was a play where the Canadiens had this like long dump in on Casey DeSmith right on goal. And look, DeSmith should have handled that rebound.
Yep.
But it popped right into the slot. And Juleson, despite having the positional advantage, just lost the race to
Yep.
the puck, and they had a fantastic rebound chance. Now, look, there were a couple nice moments too where Juleson broke up some plays on the cycle, which was nice to see. But there was also, for example, in the third period, he takes another penalty that put the Canucks down 2 men, 5-on-3 for nearly a minute there. So he worries me. I mean, I even think about that Edmonton game, even just him on the penalty kill, which you would expect to be an area for him to kind of shine as this defensively oriented defenseman. He had that ugly sort of giveaway in that second game of the season against the Oilers. So I don't know how confident you are in Juleson, but I don't love them going to 4 righties.
I don't love it either. And I highlighted Juleson as a bit of a positive player, I thought, in Montreal. You're right. He lost that foot race. I know the exact, like, it's funny. You mentioned it. I immediately knew which one you're talking about, because my criticism actually went to Casey DeSmith for that one, because I think that's a puck you have to handle if you're an NHL goaltender. And Casey DeSmith's been great, but, you know, the rebound control is one thing he's struggled with a little bit this year, like all those scramble saves that he's had to make. A lot of them could have been avoided with some better rebound control. And the Juleson play that you're talking about, yes, not a good look. But in that game, I liked it. He was blocking shots. He was throwing hits. And I think that's what you want to see from Noah Juleson. And I just think with how poorly he started the year, that game has to be a building point. Like, that was the best game I've seen Noah Juleson play all season. I mean, he hasn't played many.
That's an awfully low bar.
Sure, absolutely it is. But you have to view it as a building point for the guy, right? Like, you're right.
Sure.
I'm not.
Yeah, it wasn't terrible.
Away.
It wasn't an outright liability.
Sure, but he was close to it. He was close to it.
Like, again, just that first period where it's like he pinches in the wrong spot. Yep. I don't trust his reads.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
You pinch there, and it's that 2-on-1 chance where Slavkovsky just like flubbed the puck completely, like didn't even get a proper shot or chance on. Sort of got bailed out there by Slavkovsky not being able to pull the trigger. I just,
third star, Slavkovsky.
The one thing it does do is I think it provides a window into the types of traits that the coaching staff values, because you think about Juleson and Hirose, they're almost opposite players stylistically, because Juleson has the sort of size, the reach, the ability to sort of break up a cycle, some of the strengths down low that Hirose does not have, because Hirose is sort of undersized, a bit slight. I don't think he's put a ton of weight on. But
we heard those criticisms at the start of camp from Rick Tocchet about fitness.
And yet the flip side of the coin is I don't like Juleson's hockey IQ. Hockey IQ and decision-making, especially with the puck, is Hirose's strongest asset. So I think it says something about stylistically the type of player the Canucks sort of covet, where I think that size, that strength down low, the ability to stop the cycle, that's something that this coaching staff with Tocchet and Adam Foote really covets and values. And that's why when you see somebody like Zadorov in the Canucks' rumored interest, you're like, okay, you get a clear sense of what values this organization prioritizes when they're looking to construct their blue line.
I want to give you a prediction, a gut prediction like I do on every show. Rose gets into the lineup tomorrow in Calgary, and I don't think he comes out. I think Juleson plays tonight, but I think this is going to be another extended absence from the lineup for Noah Juleson. I don't think he's going to be the guy that stays in the lineup of these 4 right-handed defensemen. I think he's the odd man out. And I don't know if that means you have a Hirose-Myers pairing. We've talked endlessly about how Myers gets elevated throughout the game anyway. He's been doing that for like 6 years now, and 5 years in Vancouver. He keeps, he's on the third pair. He's on the third pair. Logs 18 minutes a night. And he's like up there, just continues to log minutes. But I think Hirose is going to get his opportunity in Calgary, and I don't think it's going to be one that he loses, because although we pointed out the criticisms that Tocchet had of him, he also spoke glowingly about the hockey IQ, and he talked about how that's a player that you can work on, because you can't, and someone pointed out in the chat too, you can't teach hockey IQ, right? So 100%. Hirose, I think, obviously has that advantage over Noah Juleson. We'll see how they line up tonight. Okay, some business to take care of. Here it is. Okay. It's time now for our Light the Lamp contest, courtesy of our friends at 4 Winds Brewing. Vancouver is playing. Who are they playing tonight?
Bo Horvat and the Islanders.
Bo Horvat and the Islanders tonight. We want to know who's going to score the first goal for Vancouver, and if you nail it, you could win a $25 gift card to the Four Winds Tap Room, located at 72nd and River Road in Delta. Enter by following us on social media. Keep an eye out for today's show clip and comment who you think will light the lamp and score the first goal tonight. Winners will be contacted directly. Check us out on our social channels at Canucks Army or Canucks Convo on Twitter, at CanucksArmy.com on Instagram, and Canucks Army on Facebook. And make sure you ask about Four Winds light lager at your local liquor store, or have some delivered to your front door through the online shop at fourwindsbrewing.ca. Predictions for tonight? Who's going to light the lamp?
JT.
I love this. Bring it up, Grady. Betway bet of the day. Just transitioning, and I'll let you talk about it more.
This was not planned.
This was not planned. We have not talked about this. Okay, our Betway bet of the day brought to you by our friends over at Betway. Mine tonight is JT Miller as the anytime goal scorer. I got a gut feeling in Bo Horvat's return, JT Miller is going to score a goal. $10 bet, plus 175 odds returns you $27.50. 19 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. You're feeling. You got the gut feeling. Let's go. Let's see it.
It's because JT is the guy they picked over Bo. That's exactly what management did, right? And with how hot JT's been recently, it just feels like the type of game with how well the Canucks are going, how much the Islanders have been struggling and skidding lately. I don't know. It would just be such a fitting narrative.
To your gut. I love it. You got the vibes, baby.
Such a fitting narrative for JT to put the dagger into Bo and the Islanders, and just this continuation of this next chapter.
You keep hanging out with me, you're gonna forget how to divide.
I mean, I barely know how to divide.
Yeah, me too. That's why I said
these days anyway.
You're gonna forget how to do basic math.
I don't know how to do mental math. I was actually thinking about this the other day. Like I mean, my mental math is really slow.
That's what we should do. We should have, did you do, I mean, we're the same age, so you must have, the multiplication minute? Remember? You used to get those? I sucked at those.
Well, here's the thing. As a kid, I used to get good at math when I was like 12, like 11, 12. I would write out sort of like times tables from like 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2
yeah.
Same. And then I do that all the way to like 19. So at like 12 years old, you could ask me 19 times 7 and I would know that like on the spot.
That's crazy.
And yet now you could ask me some of the most basic multiplication questions off the top of my head and I would flub them completely.
All right, when we get really low for content, Grady, you're gonna throw multiplication problems at us, and we'll
speed test.
Yeah, we'll see who can answer it first. We'll get some buzzers going.
In elementary school, that was our punishment. If you didn't do your homework, you had to do times tables.
Oh,
and of course, I always did my homework. Never missed it once.
There you go.
How fitting would it be tonight though if Bo Horvat turns the puck over, JT Miller picks it off at the blue line, walks in, and just rips it high glove?
Grady, do you know what would be more fitting? Bo Horvat blows the zone early. Blows the zone early, and JT Miller reads it because Bo's looking for the breakaway pass. Okay. Sorry, I just jumped all over the ad reads and everything, but Grady kept up, so great job, Grady. Okay, we're going to close out the show today with Anyone Else, presented by DoorDash, and I promise I will eventually start talking and not just keep doing ad reads every time on this show. It's time for Anyone Else, presented by DoorDash. It's our listeners' chance to get involved and hit us up in the YouTube live chat. It's also our listeners' chance to get 25% off and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more. For a limited time, our listeners get 25% off and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more when they download the DoorDash app and enter code NATION25. That's all capital letters, NATION25. The numbers 25. Offer valid in Canada, subject to change. Terms do apply. We've got some good ones in here. Get your Anyone Else's in, folks. I'm scrolling up because there was such a good one. Someone saying, okay, well, what about Ethan Bear? What's his injury status? We were told December was kind of the timeline there. I believe it was Dollywall that had it. Fourth mention of Dollywall by me on the show today, but I think he said it's looking like late December now. So kind of beyond the worst case scenario, I think, for the Canucks, but do you expect them to sign? Nice drop, Grady. Right on. Do you expect them to sign Ethan Bear? Like, I think now I definitely do.
I mean, I want them to sign Ethan Bear. He feels like the type of versatile piece that can move up and down your lineup, right shots. You don't have to worry about lefty-righty balance. And he gives them puck moving, which is, again, something that, I mean, look, this Canucks blue line could use some size, but it could also use some puck moving, right? It could use upgrades anywhere it can get. And Bear, I thought, fit pretty well with this group last year. It just gives you a lot of options, right? Because we're talking about, for example, this situation right now where the bottom four perhaps looks a little bit shaky with Soucy out. How nice would it be if you had another plug and play option for Hughes to play with, that you could go all of a sudden, all right, we want to bump Hronek down to stabilize the bottom four, which the Canucks may have to do at some point if the bottom four of the next handful of games does really struggle. But if you had somebody like Bear, who last season, their numbers together, Hughes and Bear, were really strong. And he's sort of Hronek light in that he can fill that same role of being able to get Hughes more touches offensively, which he really seems to enjoy. And it will allow you to balance out the rest of the blue line really well. So I want them to sign Bear if they can find a way to do it.
This one from Jesse C. Hirose, Irwin, Wolanin are just different styles of play. Or he's asking, excuse me, if those guys are just different styles of player and they can kind of fill the gap, or is 6 to 8 weeks long enough to bring up Irwin, Wolanin and risk losing them on waivers when Soucy is eventually back? I think you have to run that risk.
Yeah.
If it comes to icing your best defense core, you have to risk losing those guys on waivers. And I mean, you know, that's what depth is for. You can't be scared to use your best depth pieces because you're scared of losing them on waivers. Like, and there's no disrespect to the player, but what do we think Christian Wolanin is going to be long term? Like, he was the AHL defenseman of the year last year, but you laid it out. He had a pretty underwhelming camp, right? Like, he's been good in the AHL again, but we've seen players like that for years that are good, even really good in the AHL, and can't make it work in the NHL. Look, I really like Christian Wolanin. I still think there's a chance he makes it work in the NHL, but you can't leave this guy down in Abbotsford and use waivers as your reasoning for it, right? Like, I don't think you can do that. I think if this guy's going to become an NHLer, he can't keep spending all his time in the AHL.
Yeah.
I want to see this guy at the NHL level. If you're going to call up Wolanin, which I think they should, you know, obviously a little banged up right now as we laid out, but you can't be scared of losing this guy on waivers. You can't. And obviously the same goes for Matt Irwin, but Wolanin's obviously the bigger risk to lose on waivers.
Yeah, I think you give Hirose a shot eventually. And if he's up to the task, great. If he's not, Wolanin's your next man up, because Irwin, he was actually a regular sort of everyday player for the Capitals, played a ton of minutes or a ton of games last season. But just watching him in camp and preseason, he just looks too slow. He looks a step behind, and so to me, he's the clear number 3 behind Wolanin and Hirose in terms of your next man up LD options.
Okay, this is one for you. Do you feel certain positions are harder to pro scout than others because teams play different systems? This one from Jesse.
Defenseman for sure. And I think it's not just pro scouting, but even the numbers. I put much less stock into a defenseman's numbers because of how much they can be influenced by environment, right? For instance, I mean, Hampus Lindholm in Anaheim, nobody was talking about him as a sort of stud top 4 defenseman. Like, he'd been a top 4 D for a long time, but people weren't talking about him as this all situations workhorse the way they were when Anaheim was good. So Ducks had been struggling. He moves to Boston. All of a sudden last year, he's getting a ton of Norris votes. I don't think it's that Hampus Lindholm is all of a sudden just over the summer became this totally different player. I think the environment shift was totally different in going from Anaheim to Boston.
It's a great example.
And you look at these analytical models, their perception of Lindholm totally changed. And it's the same when you watch these guys play, right? Because even watching Lindholm in Anaheim, he didn't look particularly dominant, but then you put him in an environment where he's got a better partner to play with, better system, better forwards, more structure, and he looked like a number 1 defenseman last year. So defensemen, I think, because of the context difference, are definitely much tougher than, let's say, wingers or centers in terms of trying to extrapolate a player's independent value.
This is a fantastic anyone else from Toymaker. I didn't think I'd see this name in the chat today. You need Derek Dorsett style crash and bangers and Shen types for playoff hockey. Leafs can't get past the second round. too much offense.
No,
Absolutely, you
bad
need
take.
Derek Dorsett. Great
Bad
take, Toy
take.
Maker. Great take.
Here's the thing: the Leafs tried to do that, right? They went out and one year their big splashy acquisition was Nick Foligno. They've had guys like Kyle Clifford and Wayne Simmons. Now they have Ryan Reeves. Like they've tried to add toughness around the margins.
They got to be able to play. That's the
Exactly.
thing, right?
Like Derek Dorsett. Derek Dorsett could play. Do not slander Derek Dorsett on this show. That's
look at a guy like Keegan Colasar last year on the Golden Knights, like
Yes,
Carrier, Nick Waugh, guys that you can trust to not only be in key defensive matchups, but also bring the physicality and ramp it up when you need them to.
Yeah.
Forecheck hard, right? But also get back and make sure you're covering, those forwards.
And I've said it for years. Keegan Colasar is just Derek Dorsett light.
Oh, yeah. But that's a good point. If these guys can play, if they're independent of their size and edge, good players, that's perfect. Those are the types of players you want to add because, adding size on whether it's a blue line or up front, those things do matter, especially when it comes to breaking up cycles, defending the front of your net. When you look at the Canucks' forward group, it's definitely not the biggest group, especially when you look at somebody like Pia Suter being your third line center. It's nice. If you could long-term, and I know we kind of touched on it yesterday, but long-term, when you're talking about the Canucks being a contender, it'd be great if you could have an upgraded version of Joshua in that sort of third line role where, the player can add that same power heft element, but an upgraded version of a better player.
Like another Sam Lafferty almost, right? Like, and we talking about the architect of players. He basically brings you everything you would want in a third, fourth line checking role.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. We'll close out anyone else on this thought because it's kind of a lot of people have weighed in on it. It's the Zadorov-Tanev conversation. And I think people are kind of putting it together that if the Canucks are going to go out and make this trade for one of these two guys who, like we said, are both UFAs at the end of this season, they're going to have to give up a Nils Höglander, a Vasily Podkolzin, and an Aatu Räty. And I think Antagonist had a really good point in the YouTube live chat here. He said, do not trade Räty, Höglander, or Podkolzin. Very short-sighted. And you go back to the conversation that we had yesterday about how you need at least one or two of these guys to hit, and even extending to the prospect pool with Lekkerimaki and Brustevich and Willander, how you need these guys to hit if that's what you're going to be a competitive team for years instead of just this year. You need to have these guys coming in. You need to have them coming in on cheap contracts. You pointed out that Nils Höglander is off to a great start this year. He's locked up at 1.25 next year as well. And if he can be a consistent contributor for you through the back half of this season and into next season, that's really good found money. Like that's in terms of a player's value in the most true sense of the word. That's what we're talking about with a guy like Nils Höglander or obviously Podkolzin or whoever that can come in, be a cheap option in your lineup, but can really help you win games. Like it's almost like, and again, not to rag on a certain player, but Stéphane Roger wrote something at Canucks Army ahead of free agency where he said the Canucks shouldn't be trying to sign Carson Soucy. They should be trying to find the next Carson Soucy. And what he talked about was that Seattle identified this as a guy with the Minnesota Wild that they could put into their lineup. And look, he was cheap, right? And then as soon as he needed to get paid, Seattle said goodbye. And he obviously came to Vancouver off to a great start. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, the guy who's injured right now. But it's just that philosophy of if you're going to contend, you're going to need these guys to be homegrown, and you're going to need them to come in when they are still cheap and have big impacts.
Yeah, and you look at the Canucks' lineup right now and trying to sort out the cap situation, be as efficient as possible. For as much as we love Connor Garland's play, recently he's a luxury considering how much he makes at nearly $5 million. How great would it be if next season you can develop Höglander to the point where he can be Garland light?
Yeah.
Where he can give you 75, even if he's 75 to 80% of the player Garland is, as long as it comes at a fraction of the cost, that type of piece is more valuable to you, even though Garland will still be next season the better player.
Sorry, Grady, I thought you wanted to chime in.
No, I was going to say to Antagonist, I hear what he's saying about not trading Räty, Höglander, and Pods, but I think it all depends on what you're getting back. If you're getting a top 4 right shot defenseman. Now it'd have to probably be more than that package because we know, that's a premium position. But it alludes to the bigger point that you always have to have those guys on ELCs coming in, those college free agents, those European free agents, or you find a guy like Sam Lafferty who only costs you, a late round pick. In a vacuum, I hear what he's saying, but I think, in full context, if the right deal comes along, you have to be willing to pull the trigger. And let's not forget, Hoglander, Podkolzin, that was the previous regime's draft picks. Rutherford, Allvin, they can be trigger happy. They like to make splashes and get out of things. I don't think they're going to be tied to those players, even though the prospect pool is getting better. Like, if they see a deal that needs to be made out there, I don't think they'll have any qualms with parting with one of those guys. Maybe not Ratu because he was just acquired, but I could see Podkolzin and Hoglander.
I like what you said there about loading up, kind of like it kind of speaks to the conversation about how you need to continually replenish the prospect pool if you're going to be a contender, because we just talked about, like, I spoke of it in the sense of you need these guys to come into your lineup, but hey, if you're a contender, like, you are going to want to acquire some rentals down the line, right? So if you have these guys, it's going to make making these deals better. Because like think about in recent years, the later years of the Benning regime, they wanted to compete and they couldn't trade for anybody because they had no trade chips. Like, there was a time when Jack Rathbone was this organization's best prospect and best trade chip. And at the time, they didn't want to trade him because they needed a defenseman to hit. Now they've kind of replenished things. You have to keep that cycle going. That's just what good organizations do. And you make those free agent signings. And that, look, if there's anywhere that this current management regime deserves an A++, it's on their AHL, NCAA, those kind of signings, the guys that they're getting out of there, the development, all that sort of stuff. Like, that's where they deserve full marks, if anywhere.
Yeah, and like Grady said, it's worth it if it's, let's say, a top 4 right-handed defenseman where you're constructing a bigger package for a piece that's going to fit be a long-term fit, not just for this season. I think where we're saying be careful about giving up these guys is if we're talking about a rental.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, Canucks, Islanders, it goes tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. But for now, we'll wrap it up there. For my co-host, Harmon Dial, and our technical producer, Grady Sass, my name is David Quadrelli. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation with Harmon and Quads every weekday at 2 p.m. Be sure to check it out on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. And if you missed it, go check it out on your favorite podcast catcher app.